welcome to the pod, and we are really happy to have a conversation with you. So what we're going to talk today, or what we want to try establishing, is that AI is a big topic, is a big theme emerging. Data has always been an emerging theme.
Yeah.
Then omnichannel, the very old omnichannel
Yeah.
strategy that all retailers are going behind. So we'll try to focus on intersection of all these different elements.
Sure.
And please bring in your perspective, and let's have a chat around these topics. Why don't you start by introducing yourself?
Yeah. Thank you, Ansar, for inviting me, and thank you for the time. Let me just start with the introduction of the group. I think, see, I've been working for a group called Cenomi. It's one of the largest lifestyle players in the Middle East. We are one of the largest mall groups in KSA and probably in the Middle East as well. We're also into retail and e-commerce and multiple interests. So my role there has been to kind of look at the entire ecosystem and trying to, optimize it, transform it as we see the technology landscape changing. And, obviously there's a lot of transformation that needs to be done. And these are interesting times. Like you said, there's a heavy overlap between what's happening on the technology side, the sudden leap of, technologies that have come out. Obviously, there is the Gen AI piece, and as AI evolves from the basic AI ML to generative AI and further, there's obviously a lot of change that we also anticipate. But the fundamentals of digital transformation, from let's say getting the data, getting the metadata, getting that, those basics still remain intact, because obviously I think the primary journey for most of the companies like us and many others is in fact to ensure that first of all your landscape is clean. It generates the right data, your data collection points are right, because obviously that sets the foundation block for any kind of analysis, whether it is from a transactional nature or whether it's from anything that you want to do with the customer side, or if you want to do any automation. I mean, across the board, I think that focus on data to be clean, to be collected, to be made available in a way that can be consumed is one of the core focuses. And whether it is digital applications or enterprise applications or the creation of any kind of data construct. I know we have been talking about, data warehouses from the Hadoop days or the Teradata days. So, getting on to more, let's say, data lake house and so on. So I think the focus now is on kind of getting that corrected so that we are ready for all these changes that are happening. That's one part. And obviously on the application side, it's always to see how do we kind of leverage this data. And, we do a lot of experimentation with these, LLMs and, LangChain and RAGs and all that. Because I think the simple thing is that obviously these are bound to give big changes, right? So, and obviously they can help with our entire journey. Yeah, it's pretty huge. So, though it's a little bit of magical for some people, right? So, I mean, when you see the way that it has progressed from when it's been announced, there's a lot of things. But we are trying to be real to the ground. I mean, not get carried away by what's being said. Because practically, obviously, you have to deliver use cases, right?
Just to segue on that. So, where do you see the narrative of a customer, in this context?
Yeah, so I think,
I mean, people like you, your group, the way you guys are trying to capture the value is the entire lifestyle spectrum, right?
yeah,
So you have data coming from all the way from the footfall to the final
yeah.
transaction. So where does the customer narrative sit in this context?
So I think you rightly said, see, we are a physical locations player. So we are a lifestyle company. So obviously we have large malls. So whether it's a mall, whether it's a retail outlet, there are people who are visiting these, and the telemetry required from each and every one of them is important. So I think whenever we talk about these, bit traditional customer 360s and, facts where we are trying to CDPs and all that. Now, those are interesting to say, but the real thing is that we somehow need to transcend the digital as well as the physical, which has always been a challenge, right? If there's a customer in the mall, how do you know that this is the customer? So solving for those, I mean, multiple.
Also, you have to navigate the compliance
100%, 100%, 100%. So that I think getting them into a location and to kind of ensure that the customer experience is a turbocharged, identify the customer, reward them for loyalty. So there are multiple means, I think. But I think the key challenge is that when we actually look at these large locations, then the mesh of telemetry from IoT devices,
Yeah.
from perhaps your Wi-Fi system, perhaps your loyalty system, perhaps your cameras. So all these need to be fused together after identification of the customer, right? So
It's an
yeah.
interesting point. Beyond surveillance, you re- we haven't seen a lot of the businesses actually getting into the telemetry scenario and capturing that data and making use of it.
Yeah.
Do you agree,
Yeah.
disagree?
No, no, I think it's true. I think we have done that, and previous assignments also I've done that. But I think we have a degree of data, telemetry from, let's say, visual counters, from IoT devices, from beacons, and so on and so forth. See, there are capabilities within most of these, systems to actually trigger real-time events. To trigger purchase, incentives or promotions and personalizations. So the capability has always existed, though there have been limitations to the fact that how much do you want to promote it. So I see the entire thing evolving from the fact that today, when people do come to your shop, when you see the behavior, not from video, but from, let's say he comes to the shop and he uses the mobile app, or, he buys for certain things. You already have integration to a certain extent to understand that he's a customer. There's a pattern to what he's buying. If you have a loyalty history for that, then you even know the basket. If you see him coming frequently to, let's say, your shop, based on the fact that you are, obviously, he has a app or something that is used to, and he's agreed to that. So then there is the granularity to trigger an event. So essentially, when Ansar walks into the mall, we should know that, yeah, Ansar has walked into the mall. He regularly goes to the coffee shop. Obviously, we need to give him in. So
You know that
yeah,
if I'm a loyal customer living in the area,
yeah,
you know that I'm bound to be in
absolutely,
that
absolutely,
mall in the
absolutely.
frequency, weekends, who all
Yeah.
are coming with me. I think it's not very hard to crack that.
I think the barrier is in the fact that you have got too many partners, right? Because obviously the ecosystem is divided. So I think triggering
The slice of the
absolutely,
data.
absolutely, yeah, and by another party, because there's third parties trying to. For example, you are the coffee shop. Now, how does a mall allow a coffee shop owner to trigger notifications to everybody? Is it possible? Absolutely.
Who's owning the customer in that moment, right?
Absolutely,
Like,
absolutely.
are you as a tenant, mall operator, are you
Yeah.
owning that, or the tenant owning that?
So I think
I
that's
mean, these are like open points, I believe.
100%. I think this has been the traditional problem. I think if you look at large malls, right, the sharing of data in the ecosystem is not very clear. Now, does that mean that there can't be a data monetization? No, there's several attempts. Now, as this journey, I think, goes further, I see the fact that, this will be a platform that most of the malls at some point, or, lifestyle, let's not call even in malls, because people are coming there to, especially in the Middle East, right? People come there to spend time.
There's a lot of value to unlock.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So I think they spend a lot of time there. So especially if the customer has come into a physical location, then there's a lot you can do.
Yeah.
In terms of incentivizing or rewarding behavior and so on and so forth. But the good thing is that the technology is there. The platforms are available. You have the stacks to observe the telemetry, interpret it, and also trigger and make it available to kind of parties to So I think our efforts are also in the same thing, that actually, let's say that we, at least for first, we know, and then we have data in a format that can be used by agreed parties to target and share and so on.
I'm sure there is no one way of doing this, right?
No, no,
so,
no.
so what's your view on that? Like, do you go for out of the shelf solution, or what's your view on it?
I think the reality is that it needs a lot of experimentation, right? You really don't know what's the right approach and the wrong. So we have always gone with a lot of beta A/B tests, right? So trying to search out whether this data meshes. For example, like I mentioned, loyalty. I mentioned that certain malls we have got IoT devices, there's beacons or Wi-Fi. Certain places you've got camera analytics as well. Now the problem is always unifying the customer and to react when we know the customer profile, right? So the challenge is, obviously, the first part is a technology question, which is solvable. Yeah. Second is the ecosystem, where you need to share and target. From a platform perspective, yes. So in this case, what happens is what works and what doesn't work. What's the ROI for it? If you go for, let's say, a off-the-shelf solution, you might, you can experiment with it. But I believe
I
it's,
mean,
yeah,
ROI is the key word. I mean, you
absolutely,
can go all the way up to Amazon Go.
yeah,
And
absolutely,
you
absolutely.
know what when they're
No, absolutely, absolutely. No, I think I really believe that these are the companies that have these things. They need the ability to be able to experiment, whether it is with some engineering of their own or whether they use some of the shell products. I mean, if it's an extensible product, like when it's a totally extensible, and we can actually experiment with and it has got a low code framework of its own and so forth. And then there is the ability for us to tweak it, to see and test. I think the important part is that nobody has done it perfectly till date. So it's a little bit of an unknown. How do you deliver this journey seamlessly while you work in an ecosystem? Big question, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then you need to show, prove, tell. So then the only way is to build new use cases, try to deliver small sets, prove it, and then go forward. So I would tilt towards a little bit of engineering, customization,
hybrid,
yeah, hybrid, yeah, absolutely.
I think just in line with that, part of our transformation projects and the clients that we work with, a lot of emphasis is on the customer side, like the customer touch points and what should be the journey
Yeah.
and all that. But we find it hard, there is not much attention
Yeah.
being put on the back end of the story, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And if you dig deep, when
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
you see the single view paradigm is missing,
Yeah.
either the single view of the customer is
True, true,
missing,
true.
inventory is missing.
Absolutely.
So what is your view in terms of putting it all these pieces together? Like you wanna
Yeah.
bottom up or top down?
I think there are three things that are very important, right? When we look at technology transformation, one is obviously from the customer end, right? Because that drives two objectives for us. The first is obviously the experience of the customer. So there are initiatives to turbocharge that. But obviously, our eyes are on revenue. Can you actually leverage that to increase your revenue? So we have obviously journeys that are looking at the revenue part from the customer. But in order to deliver these two, we obviously need the backend. And there's a third angle, which is basically the cost angle, which is automation of your processes, getting your process more automated. So these three are always in interplay.
Angle as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think you have to ensure that the enterprise is cleaned up as well, because in order to deliver these use cases, like you said in retail, your inventory management systems, your forecasting, supply chain systems also have to be enabled. Similarly, for let's say if you're a let's say mall company or a real estate company, how are releases going to be? What's the intelligence behind it? Can you actually propose something fast and thick when you're doing a negotiation? Can you use something that is actually reading up these documents and saying, hey, actually, this is what's happening? And also look at the sales data, because today, let's take a simple use case. I want to increase my, let's say, my lease rentals by X, yeah, or my, interaction. So, and there's multiple elements to it. But if you do not know at the said moment what contracts existed for, location that this place, yeah. So how do you look that up? Then you have to interplay that with the sales that is happening in the region. Okay, is there a footfall that is happening in the region? Then that's also another. So I think all these parameters together allow you to pitch, say, hey, Ansar, actually your shop is in a prime place. The average sales around here is this much, and your footfall is actually over the roof, let's say. So then obviously we have to work on that. So I think these kind of telemetries, if it's available, insights, if it is available directly on the fly, especially with the evolving tech that we have, which is a big mix between the databases having languages, there's unstructured data, and if any of these LLMs are able to structure it, and we are able to build applications to serve that, then you have an intelligent negotiator in terms of your getting more revenue. Yeah.
But with all the LLMs spurring up and ChatGPT 4.0 just came out 3 days back. So I always imagine that why don't enterprises, they have data, like people yourself play around with a huge amount of data on a day-to-day basis. Why don't you apply a standard LLM on top of this?
Yeah.
And see what magic comes out, right? To a large extent, because I understand you need people to analyze, but LLMs actually cut that part in a significant way, right?
No, absolutely. I think, but the thing is that I think, see, we have experimented with, let's say, multiple LLMs. Let's say, obviously, we use the OpenAI, ChatGPT kind of thing. Plus, we have kind of looked at Gemini and, what is the outputs. So I think when we look at all these models, the models are generic models. Obviously, you have this architecture of getting vector database embeddings and all that. So it does refine the answer. But essentially, we need something that works seamlessly. Yeah, no, not only that, it has to mesh between let's say, a relational database, an unstructured system, and then if it's multimodal, then what's happening on the ground as well, right? So there's some interplay. Now, has anybody delivered these enterprise use cases right by, let's say, like the interaction that I said, you need to connect to a, let's say, a relational database, look at the history of that. So there's obviously, a way to query natural language queries for what is available in your database. Plus there is structured, unstructured data from documents that you have, agreements. Then plus there is data in other systems that you need to fetch and see and then the current telemetry. So can we mesh all this for and use Gen AI to provide a response that curates all this together? That's where I think that's what is going to happen now.
I mean, like you said, experimentation is the key way to get there.
Absolutely. So I think we're trying to look at multiple models. There's a KLLM approach, and this is evolving day by day. To be honest, nobody is really sure as to which approach they should take. But I think what's exciting today is that the seamless connection and integration from applications to LLMs and the architecture is a bit more clear. Especially around the conversational piece and the RAG framework and all that, right? So I think those are areas where we are actively experimenting. And there's a lot of promise as well. So we'll have to see how that evolves further. And I'm sure these multimodal, LLMs will take us a long way there.
I mean, and that's our thesis here at Digital Works that 3 years from now, when we sit like this, we predict that we won't be talking about websites or mobile apps or chatbot. I think the world is going to be very different.
Yes.
And the way brands like yourself, how you interact with your customers, it's going to be very different. What do you think? Are you ready?
No, I think I think nobody is because first of all, the content. I mean, your LLMs are looking at content on the web. Actually, do companies have the right content on for models there? So that's one big thing. So are we ready from a content perspective? Actually, not, because people weren't so much interested in producing content, right? Then it's a cost. Second thing is, are we ready for the processing cost, right? Like when we look at these projects, I mean, especially these ones, the token costs are not yet in the range that they actually give a definite ROI. So there's too many variables. I think, like you said, 3 years down the line, we are looking at a new user experience, right?
Do you have compute in your TCO already, or?
Yeah,
I think that's
a
major driver.
that's a major driver actually, even for experimentation, right? Because the costs rack up very fast. I mean,
you should budget certain amount of compute.
100%. Yeah. No, I think it's good that there is compute available. But the cost is something that companies have to buy into, that there's an essential. See, I think everybody has a vision of being a AI enterprise, right? So it's a big vision. Obviously, you need to spend, experiment, and do a lot of things. And I think people have to budget for that. Yeah.
I mean, everything has to change. The way you look at your budgets, the way you look at your roadmap.
Absolutely. I think the entire interface is changing. Like you rightly said, see, we have been always looking at, better user interfaces and, building applications with vendor. But the interface itself is changing, because if you're only going to be conversational and visual and multimodal, this thing, I mean, interaction.
Mix of all that, right?
Absolutely. So
it's amazing. I mean, scary at the same time. Yeah.
True. I think it's a challenge actually, right? I remember when this Google Glass was there, right? So we were trying to do applications on the Google Glass, and the interface was a bit more clunkier, right? I mean, because when you build an application on top of it,
like almost a decade back.
Yeah, decade back. Yeah. So I mean, now if you look at it, if the vision, let's say the Apple Pro is all these. So what is the interface for that? What are the UI principles for that? Because there's no UI. There's kind of a conversational framework, right? How do you actually design for that? So there's a large paradigm that's changing, right? Because you are looking more into.
It's not like doing one or two AR use cases in the store and we are AR, VR.
Absolutely.
Changing.
And the landscape itself, because kids are using, let's say, GPT, and I was playing with my daughter on this GPT-O, right? So. Is it? I mean, after a couple
Are they using it for their homework?
No. I mean, it's just a couple of conversations, but we just ignore it after some time, right? It's not that. So, I mean, if you look at the way that the answers that is coming, it's pretty good, pretty sharp. So it's going to catch on. I mean, as we see it, especially if you look at the demos that have come out, they look impressive, especially for video. Like if I'm talking to you like this, and if it's interacting at that particular time and real time video is being processed, then it's awesome.
The whole idea on digital twin. It's like Binoo
absolutely.
Office and Binoo sitting at home at the same time.
Yeah, you could have a virtual entity. Yeah. It's actually, I don't know. It's quite scary as well, right? I mean, especially when we pitch it. The other thing is that whenever we pitch these ideas, it's almost like greater than the automation revolution. When we had automation, people were already scared that he's going to automate everything, and we are going to lose jobs. Now we're talking about several levels higher than automation, so it's a bit scary as well.
It's leapfrogging a few generations, I would say.
Absolutely.
And the NVIDIA Blackwell platform. It's crazy. I mean, you're embedding all of these things in the hardware.
True. There's a plethora of these, and I think the changes are. I mean, the speed of change is what worries me.
Catching up itself is a big task right now.
Especially, I think everybody in technology has a homework on a daily homework, to catch up. Yeah. So
amazing, Binoo. It's really lovely to have you here. And we hope to see you again.
Absolutely.
And wish you all the best with your plans.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Nice meeting you, son. Thank you.